You're crouched at the edge of a wild wheat field. It's about 11,000 BC. The sun is brutal, your feet are bare, and you've been walking for most of your life. There's no house, there's no fence, there's no plan for tomorrow, because tomorrow is wherever the food is. And right now, the food is right here. This field of tall grass nobody planted. Its seeds fat and ready. You strip a handful into a pouch and keep moving, because that's what your people have always done. Follow the animals, follow the seasons, follow the food, and it never once occurs to you that your grandchildren might never walk anywhere again. This is the story of how humans started farming. Not tractors, not supermarkets, not the guy at the market selling you a $4 heirloom tomato. We're talking about the single most important decision our species ever made. The moment humans stopped chasing food and started forcing it to grow where they stood. And here's the part nobody tells you. It might have been the worst idea we ever had. Because for almost the entire history of our species, roughly 300,000 years, humans did not farm. We hunted, we gathered, we roamed, and it worked. Hunter-gatherers had varied diets, worked surprisingly few hours, and were, according to the bones they left behind, taller and healthier than the farmers who came after them. So the real question isn't just when we started farming. It's why anyone would give up a working system for one that, at first, made life measurably worse. Let's start with where. The best-known birthplace of farming is a stretch of land called the Fertile Crescent, an arc curving through modern-day Iraq, Syria, Turkey, and the surrounding region. Around 11,000 to 12,000 years ago, something began to shift there. People who had lived as nomads started staying put. Archaeologists have a name for one of these early groups, the Natufians, and they're fascinating, because they were basically sedentary before farming even existed. They built stone houses, they stored food, they buried their dead in the same places for generations. And they did all this while still living entirely off wild plants and animals. They settled down before they had a single reason to. But nature was about to hand them one. Around this time, the planet lurched through a dramatic cold snap, a period called the Younger Dryas, where temperatures dropped and reliable food suddenly got harder to find. And here's a theory taken seriously by a lot of researchers. When the wild food these settled people depended on became unpredictable, they were stuck. They'd already committed to villages. They couldn't easily go back to wandering. So instead of following the food, they started making it, taking the seeds of the wild grasses they'd been gathering and planting them on purpose, right next to home. Not because they were inventors with a grand vision, but because they were cornered. Necessity doing the dirty work of genius. Now here's where it gets genuinely strange, because farming didn't just change how humans lived, it rewrote the plants themselves. Wild wheat has a built-in survival trick. When the seeds ripen, the stalk shatters, flinging them across the ground to plant the next generation. Great for the plant, terrible for a human trying to harvest it, because by the time you arrive, half the seeds are already gone. But every so often, a mutant plant appears, one that doesn't shatter. Its seeds stay stuck to the stalk. In the wild, that mutant is a dead end. It can't spread. But the moment humans start harvesting and carrying seeds home to plant, that broken mutant becomes the winner. Because those are exactly the seeds that end up in human hands. Generation after generation, without understanding a thing about genetics, humans were breeding a plant that could no longer survive without them. And the plant was doing the same thing right back. We think we domesticated wheat. It's just as fair to say wheat domesticated us. And this wasn't a one-time fluke in one lucky valley. This is the part that should genuinely blow your mind. Farming was invented independently, multiple separate times, by people who had never met and never could have. In China, along the Yangtze and Yellow Rivers, people were domesticating rice and millet roughly 9,000 years ago. In the highlands of New Guinea, people were cultivating taro and bananas around 7,000 years ago, completely cut off from the rest of the world. In the Andes, the potato. In Africa, sorghum. In eastern North America, an entire lost farming tradition built on plants most people have never heard of. And in Mesoamerica, humans pulled off maybe the most astonishing agricultural feat of all. They took a scrawny wild grass called teosinte, A plant with a few hard kernels locked in shells, so tough they'd break your teeth. And over thousands of years of patient selection, they transformed it into corn. If you put wild teosinte next to a modern ear of corn, you would not believe they're related. That transformation is one of the greatest acts of biological engineering in human history, done by people with no microscopes, no labs, no idea what a gene even was. Just observation, patience, and time. So the same idea, grow your own food, erupted across the planet in the same rough window, among people separated by oceans and continents. Which tells you something profound. This wasn't luck. It was a threshold humanity was always going to cross the moment conditions allowed. But let's go back to that uncomfortable claim from the beginning, because it's the real twist in this story. Farming may have made individual human lives worse. When archaeologists examine the skeletons of early farmers and compare them to the hunter-gatherers who came before, the results are grim. Early farmers were shorter. Their teeth were riddled with cavities from all the starchy grain. Their bones show signs of malnutrition, anemia, and back-breaking repetitive labor. Living crammed together beside animals and stored grain, they invented a whole new category of misery: infectious disease. Many plagues that would later devastate humanity first crossed over from the livestock farmers kept close. On almost every measure of personal health, the first farmers were worse off than their wandering ancestors. So why did farming win? Why did it take over the entire planet if it made people sick and short and miserable? The answer is brutally simple, and it's the key to everything. Farming didn't need to make you healthier. It just needed to let you have more children. A field of grain can feed far more people per acre than wild hunting ever could. Farming families could have babies faster, because settled mothers didn't have to carry a child across dozens of miles a year. More food plus more births equals more people. And more people always, eventually, overwhelm fewer people. It didn't matter that farmers were less healthy. There were simply more of them, and they kept multiplying, spreading, needing more land, pushing the hunter-gatherers to the margins of the world. Farming didn't win because it was better for you. It won because it was better at making more of you. And once that engine started turning, there was no reversing it. More food built bigger settlements. Bigger settlements needed organization. Some grew the food while others made tools, kept records, gave orders. You get storage, and the moment you can store wealth, someone will hoard it. You get property. You get inequality. You get kings and priests and soldiers and taxes, none of which really existed among small roaming bands. Every city, every empire, every civilization you have ever read about is downstream of that one decision to plant seeds instead of chase them. The pyramids, written language, mathematics, war on a massive scale, all of it grew, quite literally, out of a field of grain. There's even a strange theory about one of the oldest monumental sites on Earth, a place in Turkey called Göbekli Tepe, built around 11,500 years ago by people who may not have fully farmed yet. Massive carved stone pillars, arranged with obvious purpose, raised before agriculture had truly taken hold. Some researchers suspect the order runs backwards from what we'd assume. Maybe people didn't build temples because they had farming. Maybe they invented farming because they needed to feed the crowds who gathered to build the temple. The idea that we settled down for our gods before we settled down for our crops. It's debated, but it's a haunting possibility. So when did ancient humans first start farming? The honest answer is that there's no single moment, no lightning bolt, no one genius who figured it out. It happened gradually, across roughly 10,000 years, in at least a dozen places, driven by climate, hunger, accident, and the slow, patient pressure of people trying to survive one more season. The best evidence puts the first true farming in the Fertile Crescent around 11,000 to 12,000 years ago, with the rest of the world following in its own time, on its own terms, with its own plants. But the deeper truth is that farming wasn't an invention so much as a trap that closed slowly and beautifully, one seed at a time. Nobody chose to build civilization. They just chose to plant a field near home, and then another, and then to stay a little longer. And here's the thread that runs unbroken from that field of wild wheat straight to you. Almost everything you ate today, the bread, the rice, the corn, the meat, came from that ancient gamble. Every meal you've ever had was made possible by some anonymous person 11,000 years ago who looked at a handful of seeds and decided, against all instinct, to put them in the ground and wait. They never saw the harvest we're living in. But you're eating it right now.